Hello, my name is Paige Glemser, and today I'm going to be giving a presentation on human rights issues. I go to Bloomsburg University, I'm a sophomore here, and I'm a political science major. So just as a general description and definition of what human rights really is, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it's defined as the rights such as freedom from unlawful imprisonment, torture, execution, regarded as belonging fundamentally to all persons. So that's just a general understanding of what it is, so you can better understand the rest of this presentation. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was founded after the events of World War II and the Holocaust. So this Declaration of Human Rights is a standard in law that all countries are held accountable to and judged regarding human rights violations that occur within their countries. So what are human rights violations? They can happen a lot of the time they're committed by the state. So the state can commit them directly or indirectly to its citizens. They can either be intentionally committed or the state can fail to prevent the violations just from occurring within their state and societies. And conflict is amongst society caused by the failure of state to maintain peace. So the state can fail to maintain peace within the society, which can cause human rights violations. And if the state does not step in to prevent these violations that are occurring in their country, then it is held responsible for the human rights violations. So what are human rights? Human rights are civil rights, political rights, economic rights, cultural rights, and social rights. So first generation rights would be the civil rights and political rights. And civil rights are the right to life, safety, and equality. And political rights are the right to a fair trial and the right to vote. And then economic, social, and cultural rights are the right to work, to education, to physical and mental health. So some examples of economic, cultural, and social rights violations would be contaminating water with, for example, state-owned facilities, which would violate the right to health, evicting people by force from their homes, which would violate the right to adequate housing, denying services and information about health, which is denying the right to health, discriminating at work based on traits like race, gender, and sexual orientation, which would violate the right to work, failing to provide maternity leave, which violates a person's protection of and assistance to the family, not paying a sufficient minimum wage, violates the rights to work, segregating students based on disabilities, violates the right to education, forbidding the use of minority/indigenous languages, which is the right to participate in cultural life. So human rights are most often violated during a time of war and conflict within the state. And these aren't always related to conflict. They can happen at any given time, but most of the time these violations are occurring because of war or a conflict. Violations of civil and political rights would be things like genocide, torture, and arbitrary arrest. Economic, cultural, and social rights can be violated by states or any other state actor. So I just have a few examples of human violations that are happening in our today's society that I think everyone's pretty well informed about. So the first would be the Israel and Pakistan war. So the UN has recognized war crimes that have violated human rights during this war. And these war crimes that the UN has recognized would be things like the unlawful killings, hostage taking, destruction of civilian property, collective punishment, forced displacement, incitement to hatred and violence, sexual assault, and torture. These violate human rights of the people that are within these countries, as well as international humanitarian laws. And then the next example that I have would be the war in Ukraine. So the war in Ukraine between them and Russia has caused many human rights violations, and the UN has defined or recognized these human rights violations as arbitrary deprivation of life, arbitrary detention and enforced disappearance, torture and ill treatment, and sexual assault. So these war crimes aren't just happening to the civilians of these countries, they are also being committed against the combatants who are fighting these wars. And 5,987 civilian casualties have occurred, and within those casualties, 1,605 are dead, as well as 4,382 injured. There are many more casualties that have taken place, but this number is just the amount of confirmed deaths or injuries. And then as far as the US and its human rights policies, the US Department of State makes human rights policies that are in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The US is slowly reforming its human rights policies, but still has much progress that needs to be made. And some of the most, I would say, well-known, prominent human rights violations today would be things like the border crisis, as well as racism within society. And here on my last slide, I just have the sources of the websites that I used for this presentation. So that is my presentation on human rights. Thank you for listening.